Welcome to the Emerging Civil War podcast. I'm Chris Mackowski, and joining me today is the second South Carolina string band, or at least three of the six guys. And this is super exciting for me because I've been listening to their music for decades, and I hope that doesn't offend them or make them feel old. But boy, this is a super big treat for me. So on my screen, I'm going to kind of go the Hollywood Square style to introduce you guys. It's Fred Ewers. Fred, how are you today?
I'm awake and upright and taking nourishment. Thank you.
And below him is his brother, Joe Ewers. Joe, how are you, pal?
Passing well, as they used to say back in the camps.
Very good. And David Goss is down in my lower right-hand corner. David, how are you?
Very well, thanks. How are you? Thanks, thanks for having us on.
Oh, this is a real treat. Now, you guys have been making music for a while, but you've been kind of in semi-retirement. And so you're sort of billing an upcoming concert as Ain't Dead Yet. So tell me a little bit why you guys are kind of getting together for yet one more turn. Yeah, Joe's got the Superman t-shirt going there.
There you go. Look at that.
So,
That's the printer's proof, Dave. So
Yes, we ain't dead yet.
quite.
Want me to handle that one?
sure, David.
Okay. As best as I can understand, we had a long-standing relationship with George Loomis, who was for many years he was the owner of the regimental quartermaster. And in his memory and in his honor, there was a museum that was organized in Gettysburg not too long ago to display his collection of primarily war-related, particularly Civil War, although they have other wars reflected, memorabilia. He has had a very large and very valuable historical collection. And so this museum was put together, the George Lomas Center, and we were contacted. I think originally Fred was contacted, and then Fred contacted Joe. And the question that they asked us was, would you be willing to do a benefit, come out of retirement to do a benefit concert so that we might be able to raise a little bit of money and honor the memory of somebody who had been our friend and supporter for so many years, George Lomas. And I think we all, when we heard that it was George, and of course, in the Gettysburg reenactment, which of course went on for years and years and years and years, he, for whatever reason, we were very grateful. He singled us out as one of his favorite, if not his favorite band. And we wound up playing Gettysburg year after year after year. And we got to know him very well. We got to be friends with him. Fred worked very closely with him. Joe, of course, got to be friends with him as well. And we thought, we got to do this. And so when Joe did a sort of a survey of the old band members and asked, would anybody be interested in doing a benefit concert to honor George Loomis and this newly established wonderful museum that's in Gettysburg, everyone, and I mean everyone, I think it was unanimous, everyone said yes. And so we're doing it.
Oh, fantastic. Joe, tell us a little bit about when you guys are getting together for this concert and how folks might be able to get involved.
Well, we're all supposed to be practicing separately at home because we're not going to get together. We're spread out from from Massachusetts to Manassas, as I used to like to say. Joe Whitney, our Pfeiffer, lives in near Manassas, and of course, David is in Massachusetts. Fred's in South Carolina now, so we actually have somebody who lives in South Carolina who's part of the band. And so I thought it would be, the one way that we could rehearse, because we haven't played together except for twice in the last 5 years, since 2019. I keep doing that. 2019. The last event we had was in Gettysburg, Remembrance Day, ironically. And it was right before COVID struck. And so it occurred to me, we have all of our music is on YouTube, either the albums, which CD Baby put up about 8 years ago, all of them, and the videos that we've put up since, so we can play along with ourselves. And so we don't have to actually be in the same room. That being said, we're all gathering in Gettysburg on the 12th of November, and we'll be rehearsing for 2 days prior to the concert on Friday.
In
And,
an undisclosed location.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, and so we're looking forward to that. And but I don't know, it's been going pretty well. Like I said, we haven't played together except for twice. One was for a combined birthday party that my wife threw for my brother and I a year ago. The end of this month. Fred's birthday is late September and mine's early October. And so we had this shindig, and the whole band was there. The original band, all five guys that were in the original band, including our long retired drummer, John Frailer. And as we did in, I guess it was September of 2020, we played on the front porch of my home here in Connecticut. And it wasn't that bad, It was, we still had the chops, sort of. And so we were looking forward to getting back to this, and we're looking forward to this event. George was a huge factor in our, I guess, emergence over the years. We started, the first time we played was at the 130th Gettysburg, and that was we played in, I think, the early evening, an hour-long concert. The next year we were the band playing the dance, and we were there for every year except for two, playing the dance until 2019. So
At least 25 years of
Yep.
performing in Gettysburg.
Yeah.
And in some cases, we would do a concert and a dance.
that's right.
And you guys, for many, many years, really maintained a very robust tour schedule during the summer, particularly during the reenactment season,
Yes.
and going to different places.
Very busy.
David, tell me a little bit about that. What was that like to just kind of like be out on the road? What was life like for the band
Well,
in the day?
I mean, the robust tour schedule, apart
Yes.
from, the traveling that was involved, as Joe said correctly, we're from various different places. We do a lot. We used to do a great deal of traveling. All of us had vans, because we often traveled with our families as well. But I think one of the things that it's even hard for us to appreciate is that when we would arrive at an event for the dance and the concert, we were also still, for many years, at least 11 or 12 years, we were still affiliated with the reenactment unit, 2nd South Carolina Company I. So besides the concert, besides doing usually a dance on a Saturday evening, we would also be out in the field with our reenactment unit, marching miles in the grass, and coming back. And frankly, a lot of the guys are feeling pretty tired. About the last thing that we felt like doing was getting our instruments out and having to go down to the big tent and do a dance or do a concert. But we traveled a lot. We were very busy, but we put in a lot of effort. I mean, we really worked. We paid our dues. We worked very hard.
Yeah. Fred, let me ask you, as the guy who's now in South Carolina, but for a long time, there wasn't anybody that was actually there. How did you guys get affiliated with the 1st or 2nd South Carolina in the first place as a reenactment unit?
Well, my brother joined the 2nd South Carolina Volunteer Infantry Company I in Salem, Massachusetts, back in
1989.
89. And as he likes to say, it was difficult to be Confederate then. It still is. I was invited to go to one of the earlier reenactments that my brother and David, who didn't know each other basically at all at that point, on George's Island in Boston Harbor, where there's an old Civil War granite fort.
Fort Warren.
Warren, and this was our birthplace, so to speak. It's a lovely location, made for a disastrous purpose, but they imprisoned Confederate officers and whatnot during the Civil War at this fort. So it was also known as Club Rib, I guess.
Club Rib.
Well, yeah, but it was a fancy, comfortable fort, considering the way the other forts were operated, I guess, in the time. Anyway, that's where we had our first meetings as riflemen in a rifle company, not as musicians trying to form a band which would eat us all alive by the time 25 years goes by. And thanks to George Lomas and the reenacting community and the folks in Gettysburg and our fans, we have risen to heights that are beyond any of our wildest dreams. It was, as we like to say, oh, it went just as we planned it. But it was all just a miraculous rise to fame, if you will. That was fun, a lot of fun, and hard work, as David so rightly said. We would travel hours and hours in the car, set up our camps. In the case of Fort Warren, we had to take a boat with our stuff. You load your car, go to the island, load it on a boat, go to the boat to the island, unload the boat onto the island, move the stuff from the dock up to the campsite, set up the campsite, and then have a reenactment. So, and then to go home, it's a reverse of that. So that's basically what our lifestyle was for a long time, several years, 12, 15 years, something like that.
Wow. Wow. So Joe, it sounds to me like the way any regimental band got together is the same way you guys got together, where you're mustered into the same regiment and you just happen to have some guys who happen to know how to play some music or instruments and you pick them up. Tell me a little bit about that genesis as a band.
Well, it's kind of a lot like having hit the lottery, because this band was the perfect mix of the talents that went into it. And we frequently have said over the years that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And going back to the first time we got together, I mean, I only knew that Dave played guitar, and of course I played banjo, and he knew that I played banjo. We had met shortly after getting mustered in the winter of 88, 89. And we did a few, drilling things during the winter time. And then there was a place that we used to go, let's say a state park in Massachusetts, and we'd go there. And Dave, I didn't have Dave's phone number at the time, and he didn't have mine and stuff. And so we knew there was going to be this drilling thing in the woods at this
Wampatuck
State Park. And so Dave brought his guitar, but I didn't know that he was bringing his guitar. So I left my banjo at home because I'm not nuts about playing banjo by itself because it's noisy. And so that was the first miss. And then we had a number of events because it was the 125th in those years. And Dave was expecting twins at that point. Not him, his wife was. And
we were.
the family. And so it was getting close to her time. And so Dave was able to go to the first event that year and not the second. And then the third event was going to be this one in August in Boston Harbor. And he was able to get away for the one night. And so that was the first time that the five of us all came together. So now you have a guitar player who is a fine singer. You have a banjo player.
Thank you.
And you have a fine fiddler. My brother, I invited to come out to this because I knew he liked camping, and I knew that he'd like to play, because we've been playing bluegrass for 20 some odd years together, in a kind of a small way. And so he came out for the first time. And on the Saturday night, after all the public had left the area, and we were, everybody had eaten their meal and they're sitting around the fire, and then they started to do their thing, and we're like, man, I don't know if we want to get too heavily involved in that. So there was this big bush. I keep talking about this. There was this big bush, and we got on one side of it, and the campfire with all the guys was on the other side of it. And the sparkling light from the fire on the one side was coming through the bush, and so we just started. It's like playing a song. And Dave knew, well, we all knew sort of these songs from like grade school, which used to be not controversial at all. And so we started singing Camptown Ladies and Oh Susanna, and songs of old Dan Tucker, Cindy, things like that.
Even Dixie.
Even Dixie. And we'd all had experience playing in various bands. My brother's been a musician, a professional musician. He's the only one in the band for probably 10 or 12 years prior to this. He and I had been playing together since I was out of high school, he was in high school, and so we had been playing folk music together because I was into that. Dave had been playing with a group in college, and they toured for a period after college. So he was, he'd been busy playing. And then we had the two percussionists, Bob Beeman on tambourine, and later on bones, and John Frailer, who was a fine military drummer. And it just happened, and it worked pretty well. And so we just fooled around with it when we had the opportunity at various events where all three of us or all five of us could be together. We would play at those, and eventually the guys in the unit kind of began to enjoy it. Well, I think they always enjoyed it. It was just different. It was another thing going on, and it went on like that into the next year. And in 1990, when we were getting out of Fort Warren, our sergeant at that asked us if we could play for a dance. They had these. It was a bakery. There were all these rooms, granite rooms, that were part of the fort. They were part of the establishment for the garrison and everything. And so we said we'd play. Yeah, we could do that. So we did. And the next day, the guy, that same sergeant, came by and he said, you guys ought to make a tape. And I was like, really? Yeah, we could probably do that. Now, at this point, Bobby Horton had already been doing it.
It turned out to be a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. It turned out well, actually. Yeah,
it turned out pretty well.
Yeah, and Bobby Horton, was the man at that time, and the band of record in those days was the 97th Regimental Band, and they were essentially an Irish pub band from Florida. And it was kind of the same thing. There were three guys that had been playing together for a while, and they'd been doing Irish music in clubs in Florida, and they got involved in reenacting, and they were really good.
And they wore Union uniforms.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, we had all joined the Confederate side in, like Fred said, in Salem, Massachusetts, and eventually it just, it's like we were the one side of the coin and the 97th was the other. And flashing forward to, I think it was 1993, the 130th Gettysburg, where we played an evening show. That was the last year that the 97th played the main dance at the Gettysburg reenactment. After that, we were the kind of the house band, and George was a hard nails businessman, and I think he saw that we had more potential than the 97th at that point in time, and so we got the gig. So
he had a good heart, though.
He did. He was a good friend, good guy.
Yeah. So Fred, Joe mentioned you're a professional musician. What's your background when you came to the band that way?
Oh, let's see. I was just thinking this through before this morning. I have been in and left 6 previous groups before this one. The high school rock and roll band, of course, during the Beatles era. Then we actually played out in other towns for different different dances, and we worked with a radio station in Boston to do record hops. So we did pretty well at that. Let's see, after that, what would be next? Well, anyway, there was a tuxedo function band that I was in for a while, the Russ Carlton Trio. We did weddings primarily. some downtown Boston hotel gigs, society gigs, things like that. I played bass guitar for most of my life during this era. Then there was the Bill Carson band, which I had been in the Army and gotten out, and then I was recruited into this Bill Carson band, which had been together for 8 years as an Irish pub band. Only they did the war songs and not just the Green Alligators and the Long Neck Geese pub songs. They did the songs about the Troubles, and so they were more along the same lines as the Second South, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah.
We could do an entire evening of Irish, and also when I joined, that expanded their repertoire into the rock and country genre, and we did a tour in Ireland. We did pretty well back in those days. This was in the early 80s, mid 80s anyway. Then that band was very difficult for me to leave. That one, I put the fiddle down for quite a while after that, because they were more like family and friend and then friends, but both. And Billy passed away, and since then, Carl was the banjo player, and well, he played banjo, pedal steel guitar, acoustic guitar. One of the happiest people I ever worked with. He passed away suddenly, and that just leaves me and Ed McAdams, who was the drummer. And incidentally, Joe and Dave don't know this, but I've been in touch with Eddie. He's coming to Gettysburg to the concert.
Oh, great.
His wife. I haven't seen him in, I don't know, 25 years. That's going to be interesting. After that band broke up, I joined another Irish pub band called the McMurphys. And so we did pubs and weddings, and we were reasonably successful at all that. We played at a place called the Chatham Bars Inn, among all others, which is a ritzy, hoity-toity hotel tourist destination in Chatham on the Cape Cod in Massachusetts. We played there regularly. Tuxedo functions again. Then my brother decided he was going to be a Civil War reenactor, and I was astounded, but I was curious. And so when I went along for the ride, so to speak, to the Fort Warren event, I did not know what to expect, and got caught up in it, and fell in love with the whole idea of dressing up and pretending to be a soldier and playing music on the side. And then that sergeant said, make a tape. We did. And by then the roller coaster was on the downhill ride, and it hasn't stopped since.
Yeah. David, how about you? You're a college professor by day. How did you get into reenacting and playing music with a Civil War band?
Well, it was, as Fred and Joe both have said, it was just one of those fortuitous things that happen that you don't plan. Initially, and I think Joe was alluding to this when he's talking about the bush and the campfire. I just wanted to see, the truth of it is, I just wanted to see from an educational point of view, I wanted to go see one of these very, very large Civil War reenactments. And it just so happened that several of my friends who also worked at that time in museums, Chris Hall worked at Plymouth Plantation down near the Cape, and I had a couple of National Park Service friends, George Briggs and John Frailer, and we all got together and we said, wouldn't you love to go to Gettysburg and see the 125th Gettysburg and just see the scale, the scope, the enormity, the splendor of it. So we thought, well, we've got to join a group. You can't just go and participate unless you belong to a group. So we found out that the only group that was near where we lived was the 2nd South Carolina Company I, which of all places in the world was based in Salem, Massachusetts, which is where I am right now.
Okay.
Which is where we live. Because I teach at a college in Massachusetts. Anyway, long story short, we decided to join. We met the leader of this august group, who was a monster of a man by the name of Richard Johns.
Both physically and intellectually.
He's just enormous. He taught at BU. He's 6'4". He had to go for like 300 pounds. He's just a mountain of a man. And he's certainly the alpha male of the Second South Carolina Company I, because he could probably bench press any one of the, he could lift you over his head.
He did. He lifted, he what do you call it? Deadlifted me over his head.
So once you join the Second South Carolina, and you may be an academic, you may work in a museum, you may work at a college, doesn't matter. Not to Richard Johns. You're just one of the grunts. You're just one of the, one of the guys. All we intended to do, and I know this is true of myself and Fred and Joe, we just wanted to play some music around the campfire. We had no idea whatsoever. And we were all from various backgrounds. I mean, Joe was a professional illustrator, children's book illustrator. John Frallo was a professional National Park Service ranger. All these different backgrounds, but we all got together and we just had some fun around the campfire. And we were trying to get our pards, our fellow members of the Second South, to sing along with us and just have a good time. And for the first couple of years, that's all there was to it. And then, as Joe says correctly, somebody overheard us. The camp people from other camps would come around and they'd sit around the fire and they'd start singing. And someone says, you guys ought to play at the dance, and you guys ought to, and we began to sort of add up to the point. Every summer we would do 3, maybe 4 special events that our unit was going to. So if Richard Johns decided the Second South Carolina was going to go to Bentonville in 2 RVs, packing 32 guys into two big vans, we would bring our instruments and we would go to, and we would wind up playing at all these different events. And over time, we just got to be, people expected us to come with our instruments, and we started getting asked to sit in on concerts or to perform on the company street or to just perform at a dance. So without any kind of marketing, without any kind of planning, fortunately, we did have Joe to do a lot of our brand, and the various ads that you might see or the covers of our albums. All of them were designed by a professional, Joe Ewers, because that's what he did. That's what he has. That's his background. That's his skill. And I got into this thing completely, honestly, by accident, completely unintentional.
What a fortuitous accident, though, right?
What was a painter guy? They used to say, it's a happy accident. It was a happy accident. And I got to say, now that we look back over 30 years, we played together. And I mean, we played the Smithsonian 3 times. They flew us out to Vicksburg. We played for the Vicksburg event. We played Wilson's Creek in Missouri. We've had some amazing experiences, and it was just a happy accident, and we all get along. I think one of the nice things about it is very few bands, and I can speak from my own personal experience, very few bands last more than 5. If you're longer than 5 years, that's a pretty good run. But to be over 30, what are we, 32?
Yeah, 32 years, give or take.
Over 30 years.
Wow.
And we're still speaking to each other, more or less. And it is, in many ways, it's like an extended family. I mean, it really is. We have close friendships with everyone in the band, and we've had a wonderful run.
Wow. So Joe had earlier described you as a fine singer, and I've always thought of you as having dulcet tones.
Oh,
so as a vocalist.
I'll tell you, Fred is a wonderful singer. Fred's got a great voice. He's a great instrumentalist. He plays guitar, he plays fiddle, and he has, in my opinion, he has a really, really good voice. And he does some of our songs, and nobody could do it better.
David, you're very kind. My baritone voice is not what it used to be. And you sound as good as ever right now.
Well, don't undersell Fred. He's very modest, but he's got a really, I enjoy his singing and I enjoy his performance very much.
Yeah. Joe, walk us through the rest of the band, because we're talking to three of you, but there are more guys who've been involved over time and more guys that are still involved now.
Well, John Frailer, like I said, was a original drummer. He was a Vietnam vet, as was our captain, Richard Johns. Both fought in Vietnam, and they had experiences that we actually probably don't want to really know about. Rich, I believe, fought at Hamburger Hill, and one of the places that he fought, and John Frailer was one of those guys that went into the tunnels. And so they brought a real sense of the military to the unit, and it was an all-men unit. It wasn't a family unit. It was was only guys, and if you wanted to bring your family, they had a camp in the civilian area, and that was a little odd for a few years, but we got through that. Let's see. So John had been playing. Actually, John was playing drums. Played drums at the 100th anniversary of the battle,
right.
reenactment of the Battle of Gettysburg,
Right.
and had a Yankee cavalryman, hit his drum with
a saber.
And John was like, I don't know, 16 at the time, something like that.
Yeah, he grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and he was a member of the Hawkins Zouaves.
Oh, yeah.
He was a Zuzu in the 125th, and this guy put a saber, a Confederate cavalryman put a saber right through his drum. He was just a kid, through his drum.
Anyway, so
then
Bob Beeman joined us. Well, he joined the unit at the same time that the rest of us did, and he wanted to be involved. He had some percussion background, and so he became the tambo bones guy, which fit in with what we got into much later on, say 4 or 5 years further into the evolution of the band. And he began to build out his impression. He started having more period-sized tambourines made for him, and began collecting all kinds of wooden bones and jaw bones of horses and everything. And Bob brought a lot of humor. You could always count on Bob to have something pithy and hilarious to say. People began to be drawn to Bob because he would set out.
He draws a crowd.
He would draw a crowd because he would set up this little stool and cover it with his dead animal parts that he would use to make music with. And people would come in, they were fascinated. What's that? What's that? How do you make this? And then he would conduct little tutorials with people that you try to show them how to play the bones, or the tambone's pretty obvious, but so that was Bob's contribution, and it grew over the years. So Bob brought something special to the table too. And then when I moved to Gettysburg in 1996, the end of 96, that precipitated kind of a problem, because now we had a Gettysburg address for the band. And
boom, I saw what you did there.
Yeah.
The band's got a Gettysburg address.
Yeah.
We were the only band with a Gettysburg address.
Yeah. So so Fred was still with with his other bands that he was playing with up in Massachusetts. And so we had this period from 96 until 2000, when Fred moved to Pennsylvania, that we were competing for Fred's not affections, but his skill set. And I think that our band couldn't really at that time approach the kind of compensation that the bands that he was playing with did. But so we needed to fill out the band a little bit to make up for those times that Fred wasn't going to be there. The banjo is basically a support instrument.
Rhythm.
In these situations, the fiddle calls the tune, and Dave's voice is the principal instrument. and his guitar just keeps a solid rhythm and a bass line going. So I felt we needed another melody instrument that would help out and to kind of take the place of the fiddle when Fred wasn't there. One aspect of that we were able to do was a guy named Marty Grudy, who was from Connecticut, and he was in a Confederate unit that we used to serve with at these events. And so we approached him, and he had moved to Gettysburg before I did, and when he retired. And so we got Marty to join us when we were recording our third album, Southern Soldier, which is the one album that has made everything else possible, with support from the first two albums that we did. Southern Soldier is just a huge success, and Marty's fife can be heard throughout that album, and it's just wonderful. And so, but Marty moved to Florida at the turn
Eventually.
in 1999 for various and sundry reasons, and we still, had to fill the gap in the ranks now and again, and so began looking for another fiddler, and I reached out, and I was able to find 3 potential guys to fill in. And after a process of elimination, we settled on a young man named Mike Paul, who at the time was working as I don't know, not exactly a sous chef, but he was working at the Dobbins House in Gettysburg in the food prep department. And I was unbelievable how quickly and easily he fit in. He is a really fine violinist fiddler. And he was like, I think 19 at the time that we recruited him. He's now, like 46 or something like that. And so he was a big part of the equation. And after Marty left, now we didn't have a fifer anymore now. And so Marty recommended, before he left, a guy named Joe Whitney. And he recommended Whitney initially as a drummer.
Okay.
And so the first time that Joe played with us was at, I think it was the 145th Manassas event, which was held in I'd have to do anyway, it was in Manassas.
Leesburg.
I'm sorry, in Leesburg. It was in Leesburg. And so Joe showed up. It was brutal hot at this weekend, and we weren't hired to play at the dance that year. The guy who was organizing it, I don't know, he didn't like the price that he wanted us to play two dances, and he didn't like the numbers I gave him, and so he hired 2 different groups to play, and so we just were there. At this time, we were acting as a sutler, and so we were selling our goods. And anyway, so Joe shows up on a Saturday, it's kind of midday, and he came in. He had his drum with him, but he also had an 1850s Firth and Pond flute with him. And holy moly! At this point, we also had Greg Hernandez at that point in time. Greg had joined Pfeiffer, another Pfeiffer from Connecticut. He joined the band at the turn. It was actually New Year's Eve was his first gig up in Massachusetts, 1999, 2000, and so he was there. So all of a sudden we had 8 guys. It sounded like an orchestra because Whitney never played his drum. He only played flute, and it was just amazing. And so for several years, up until I think just before the Vicksburg gig, we had 8 guys in the band. So and then
we had a string section, we had a woodwind section.
Yeah.
The only thing we were missing brass.
Really.
We never got around to getting a brass section.
So that's kind of the other guys in the band. Now, Mike has been, with us for all those years, and so is Joe. They're the new guys, only 20 years in. So
So when you guys get together in Gettysburg in November, who will the lineup consist of?
It'll be the 5 original guys in the band.
Including John Frailer.
And yeah,
Oh.
so it'd be Dave, Fred, myself, Bob, John Frailer, Mike, Paul, and Joe Whitney. So there'll be 7 of us.
Oh, very good, very good.
And so it's going to be that's going to be something. And I've been getting requests and comments from people on YouTube that are I don't know how to express it. It's just it's the most rewarding thing that I think, and I send out these comments to everybody. I collect them and send them out to people in the band, you know, in a kind of a monthly thing, not always on time, but things that people say about what our music has made, the difference it's made to them. One guy that, you know, he gave us credit for inspiring him to play the banjo, a guy named Knox. He's a young man. He's in Marine OCS at the moment. He's planning to come to the event. He said it was because of our band that he took up the banjo. He's got I don't know, a whole bunch of different videos on YouTube. And I left a comment for him. You know, it's like, great. You know, he was playing Gumtree Canoe and gave us a credit for. It's like, this is where it came from. And he's like, I'm like, wow. Let's see. At one of the last events that we did in Gettysburg, we were packing up at the end, and someone came up to me while I was standing on the stage and said, there's someone over by the edge of the tent there that wants to speak to you. So I followed this person over, and he introduced me to a federal officer, a guy in his 40s, I guess, artillery stuff on him. He said, I just wanted to thank you and tell you how much your music has meant to me. He said, I was in Fallujah. I fought in Fallujah, and it was very bad. He said, and your music got me through that. And he's not the only veteran who's said things like that to us. And we get these comments from people all over the planet that they just come out of nowhere, and they tell you things that just make you so proud and so appreciative. And I often say to people, we are so blessed to have had this experience together. Like Dave says, you know, we've been together for more than 30 years. We still speak to each other. We're all friends. And, you know, that's partly probably because we didn't tour together, you know, like most bands do. We got together enough, you know, to be really good. And getting back to the mix of the talents and the instrumentation, it was, well, I hesitate to say divine, but I mean, it's just 1 in a million. It's hitting the lottery in that regard. I've always considered myself a journeyman banjo player, and to be a part of this band, to play in a band that's as good as this, at my talent level, are you kidding? It's a dream come true. So, you know, we're really looking forward to have this opportunity at this stage in our career, because there were a lot of factors that came together that, you know, told us it was time to hang it up, so to speak. It's like there was the age, there were personal responsibilities, there were, you know, a number of different factors, people moving, retiring, and to get an opportunity for someone to call us up and say, gee, could you guys come and do this? I mean, like Dave has said many times to me, it's like we're more popular now than we were when we were actually we were actually playing together, you know? And so that's kind of the background on the guys that are, you know, the other guys in the band. Bob right now, he would have been part of this conversation, except that he's in Cape Breton at this point, and kind of on the fringes of modern technology, if you will. And so
he decided to build himself in his retirement, to build himself a house up on the Cabot Trail.
Oh, wow. Okay.
up in northern Nova Scotia. And yeah, that's where they'll be there up until I think October,
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Wow.
when the glaciers come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, before things freeze out and they can't get out of there.
And the Vikings show up.
So Fred and Dave, I'll ask you both this question, and Fred, I'll ask you to go first. Kind of going off of what Joe was just saying, what's it mean to you to be in this band and to have had this experience?
It was the most important thing that's happened to me in my life. Basically, going back to when you asked me what other bands I'd been in, when I was with the Bill Carson band, I had just joined them, and this is when I met the woman that I fell in love with and who agreed to marry me, for better or worse. And she has been an influence on me throughout the rest of my life, without whom I would truthfully say I would not be here talking with anybody. I would be 6 feet under. She has kept me together and went with me to all these through all these adventures with this band. And in that she's every bit as much a member of the band, not as a performer, but as a member of the family, so to speak.
Yep.
She would sell our CDs and T-shirts and whatnot. She would cook for us. She would wash our hair.
She would call dances when we needed to have someone call a dance, and she would step in and do it.
That's also the truth. Yes, we found out a little bit later on that she actually knew how to call dances, and aside from that, which is basically the most important part of it, I'm having as much trouble as my brother did expressing this. I think the best way to say it is, in 2013, I was about a year out of having had a heart attack at the 150th Gettysburg reenactment. And fortunately, I was able to go to that event and participate with the band. And at that event, well, it was a colossal event. There were people from all over the world that came to experience the American Civil War reenacting community. We signed autographs for people from Spain, Japan, Germany, China,
Australia,
Italy.
all over the country, Italy, it was beyond belief. They would come up and testify to us how we had influenced their lives musically and historically. And we just, I can't put it into words. I get emotional thinking about it. Working with these other guys in the band and all the wonderful people we've met and had experiences with, both good and bad, because some of them were downright awful. For instance, the last time we performed together at a reenactment, our band setup was hit by a derecho, a straight storm that just blew down all the tents and soaked our sound gear and sent us home with our tail between our legs. That was our last experience in the field. And so that's when we all put our instruments down and said, okay, we're done.
That sounds like a sign from God.
Yeah. But, then I was in the car with my wife on our way to visit our son in North Carolina, and I got a phone call from a person that I used to work with in Gettysburg in the retail district, and she said, "What would it take to get you guys back together?" And I almost laughed out loud, because at that point in time it was absurd to think of. But I decided to be polite, and I said, "Well, you know what? I really can't answer that. I got to put it to the forum and see what the rest of the guys say, and I'll start with my brother." And I called my brother directly from the car, and 4 days later, it was like, "Guess what? We're going to go to Gettysburg, but don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody yet." So we didn't, but we are going, and it's going to be something. It's going to be something. Hopefully it goes as well as we would like it to.
I'm sure it will. Dave, how about you? What's it meant to you to be in this band?
Uh, there's no question. It's one of the most important things that, and the thing that makes it so sort of ironic is the fact that you undertake important things in your life. You prepare for, you go to graduate school and you get degrees and, you get jobs. And this was something that I never expected. I never prepared for. And yet it has turned into one of the most important things I've ever done. It's, I'm very much like Fred and Joe on this one. The extent to which it's affected my life. And I would add quickly, like Fred, talking about Patty, by the way, you can't say enough about Patty. She was our Wendy to the Lost Boys, like in Peter Pan. She would sew our patches and she would feed us, and basically we probably couldn't have survived without Patty. So, but the point is, in my own family, never expecting that I would be able to convince my wife to get dressed up in the hot summer, in Victorian clothing. And they wanted to come and experience what I was experiencing. And they did for many years. My kids literally, I would say, grew up in the Civil War reenactment hobby as a result of my being involved, both with the 2nd South Carolina, but in the band particularly. And it's funny how it goes on and on. I have grandchildren now. One of my granddaughters went to the University of Leuven in Belgium to get her master's degree. And she met a boy, which you would expect, and they go to a dance in Leuven, Belgium. And she walks into the auditorium and everybody is in what they consider to be period clothing, it's whatever they could find. And they have this dance every year. And so they started the music. And she listened to the music and she said, "How did you get this music?" They said, "Well, we played this music every year for this dance, and it's our favorite band." She's, "Why?" She says, "Because my grandfather is singing. That's the band he's in. He's a member of the 2nd South Carolina." Yeah. All of a sudden she became a celebrity.
Oh, wow.
Oh, she's the granddaughter of the guy that sings in this band. So you just don't know the effect.
Still alive?
He's still...
They ain't dead yet. That's
the long-term, I guess you would say, the long-term effect of this band, not just on our own, Eastern United States, but almost, you could say, on an international level. We have touched a lot of lives in a great many places. And I like to think that we have brought joy. We've brought happiness. We've done something positive. We've helped to, we've been, in a way, we've tried to be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. And I think that's something that I never expected, that music, other than the music that we heard growing up, the folk music, the rock music, this is something that's completely different. And yet it's had a positive effect on many, many, many people. And I am so glad to have been part of that. I'm kind of like Fred. It's, when you really think about it, and I have to say, we have to say that a large part of the effect that we have had, we owe to the internet. Because many, many people that would never go to a reenactment, that would never come to the United States, have heard us in other parts of the world as a result of being on YouTube and other venues, on the internet. So I cannot express how pleased I am to have been, to be privileged enough to perform in this group and to play with people like Fred and Joe.
Joe, I know for you, the band is a little more of a living entity just because, part of your function is the keeper of the flame, even though the band has been retired. You're the guy who's still kind of making things happen behind the scenes from a business point of view. How has that been a little Tell me about that aspect of your career with the band as opposed to necessarily being on stage.
Kind of like Dave said, you start out on one path in life and you find yourself, on another, another thing comes along and you say, well, I could, kind of do that too. And it, I've been a Confederate since I was in the 5th or 6th grade when I first learned about the Battle of Gettysburg and so on and so forth. Always been a champion of the underdog, and of course in the 5th or 6th grade, the politics of the war between the states is not even a factor. It's just an admiration for the fighting man of the South, and ultimately that grew into an equal admiration for the Union side. As I started out as an artist, and I just wanted to be a commercial artist. And then I backed into, like so many other things in my life, I backed into being a children's book illustrator when I got an opportunity to do a book for Parker Brothers, which led to books for Random House and for Golden Books and for
Children's Television Workshop,
children, yeah, it's CTW and
The Muppets.
Sesame Street Magazine and Sesame Street Books, so forth and so on. So I had a very active and my career was doing pretty well considering that I was a freelance person. I've been running my own business from 1978 when I kind of fired myself from the job that I'd had for 10 years by talking to somebody about going freelance, not realizing that my employers could listen in on my phone calls. And so anyway, so I left that job and I, developed my illustration career until I, and beyond discovering Civil War reenacting in 1989. And it was just so exciting to, like Dave said, to pretend to be a soldier and to actually play really cool music, be able to play my banjo with a guy who played guitar, and my brother who's I've always been a fan of his and his fiddle playing. He'd been playing fiddle with my banjo in bluegrass stuff for a number of years. I think 20 or more years, and that was all very exciting. And that sort of, after we did our first tape, audio cassette, I paid for that with a credit card. I figured we'd at least sell 500 of them and I could get my money back. And it's a worst case scenario. But then we had to order more and then another tape and then another album. And
T-shirts.
Over this period of time, I've been running my own business. And so now I began to run this business too. And I think, I had the opportunity, I had some of the skills to be able to do that. I had the time because, I could make my own hours. And so anyway, it began to develop in that regard. And now after my illustration career topped out in the early 2000s, when I kind of aged out in that, and younger people came in that were making decisions and they had their friends that they wanted to do work with. And I'd always been a kind of an up the down staircase personality, as I'm sure these guys would agree to, that I would get
Very easygoing guy. I mean, he's pretty laid back, mellow.
Yeah, he's difficult to work with. And so, he can be a little difficult to work. So not everybody wanted to do that. Anyway, so I just in I guess it was in 2018, 2019 when we moved from New Hampshire. I'd moved from Gettysburg to New Hampshire in 2010, and then from there to Connecticut in December of 2019. I was not doing artwork anymore, and I never really did artwork for the sake of doing artwork. I did it for money, and it was a job. And now my oldest son had been working for Ken Burns I don't know, by 2019, 2020, by almost 30 years, and had moved up through the ranks until where he's the senior editor there and he had been editing some of the video that had just sort of happened to us over the years. Eventually we commissioned some, but Eric had worked on editing the Far From Home tape that we came out with. Was a VHS in 2000, the year 2000. And he had worked on that, but at those days, he wasn't at the position that he was in 2020. So he wasn't able to do this kind of thing for us any longer. And I discovered and had, we had agreed to, as a band, to hire people to do video for us, to sort of document some of the stuff that we were doing. And now I had accumulated all this, material. Who's going to edit that? Who's going to make that, realize its potential? So I had sat in while Eric was editing the handful of things that he'd been able to find time to do for us to put up on YouTube, 3 or 4 different pieces. And so I started fishing around on the internet looking for software that I could download, that I could, work with and do some of this stuff. And eventually I discovered DaVinci Resolve, which is a free software for the most part. At least it was when I started using it. And it's amazing, absolutely amazing. And so I began to learn how to use it. And again, the internet, like Dave said, came to the rescue. And if you had a question, you didn't know how to do something, how do I, like 25 different things, turn up, and you pick the one that, that looks like it's closest to what your needs are. And so I've gone from having a career as a children's book illustrator to being in a sense, a video editor here in my soon to be 81st year. And it's given me something to do. It's and one of the hardest things about retirement, I think, for a lot of people is, what do you do? How do you fill your days? And some people struggle with that. I know our father did, my brother and mine. And I know that other people in my family had. And so I consider it, again, an extended blessing that I have this to work with, and I have an outlet for it. So that's all kind of a preamble to the fact that we're not getting paid to do this gig in Gettysburg. It's a huge opportunity for us, and we're blessed to have been asked. But as part of the deal, I asked them, I said, I want this video. I want it, shot. And we get the video. That's our payday, because I can use that, I can cut it up into songs, or I can do the whole concert or whatever and put it up on YouTube. And that will continue to generate income for the band, which we share quarterly. And eventually it will, not sure how long, but it will also benefit the American Battlefield Trust.
Wow.
So
What do you call
that's just like we planned.
Yeah, that's just how you started, right?
Yeah.
So as we head into the home stretch, let me just ask you each if you have like a favorite memory you want to share to end with. Fred, can I start with you?
Oh my goodness.
I know that's a really tough question after a long career of many good memories.
I kind of anticipated this question, and I think I've already answered it. The highlight of the whole ride to me was the 150th Gettysburg reenactment, the experience of meeting the fans from all over the world, face to face. I was astounded.
Yeah. Dave, how about you?
I would have to say right at the very top of my favorite experiences was we were invited, and this had been coming for over a year, and it was a bit of a surprise for us. We had been invited to do some soundtrack work for the Warner Brothers film Gods and Generals. And we were working with a music director by the name of David Franco, who has done a lot of work. And when we were done recording in New York, out of the blue, something that we just weren't expecting, and oh my goodness, he said, we were thinking of hiring a group of actors to perform as the band on stage, but if you guys can come dressed like the actors in the film, we have reenactors that are coming down. Would you like to be on stage in the film, and you could sync your, you could voice sync the music that you recorded yourselves. So they brought us down to the I guess it was in Maryland where the scene was being, where was the film being done? Virginia?
Boonesboro, I think.
Yeah. And they built a stage for the band, and they have a scene, and the scene did not get cut. Thank goodness it didn't get cut out of the movie. But they have a scene of the 2nd South Carolina, and David Kincaid is on stage with us too, and John Whalen is on stage with us too. I mean, people that we love and admire, and very, very good musicians. And there we are on stage in front of General Lee and General Jackson and all the other guys. And I think that the filming of that, for me, was one of the real highlights that I remember.
Oh, wow. Yeah, a great scene. Great scene. Joe?
Yeah, we like to say that was the principal scene in the movie that showed genuine human emotion, which was enjoyment, because everybody was having a great time. I'd say, yeah, probably.
We like Ron Maxwell very much.
Yeah, probably the same thing. That was a big one. The gig at the Smithsonian was we did. David mentioned we played at the Smithsonian 3 times and stayed at the Willard Hotel. and got the hairy eyeball from the maitre d' in the breakfast lounge in the morning.
We went into the breakfast lounge fully dressed as Civil War soldiers. They didn't want to seat us.
I'm sorry, this is only for hotel guests. Yeah.
Go.
I think I'm going to say that probably, as far as those kind of events, those two kind of things stand out. But for me, I think the highlight of the whole experience is to be able to continue to play with my brother after, from high school to now, and to have earned his respect as a musician, or as at least as a banjo player, and to
not the same thing.
And to just to have had this experience with these guys, it's a blessing. It's to have been in this band has meant more to me than having been a successful children's book illustrator. And there's really no question about that. I had more than 100 titles that I had illustrated, many of them for Sesame Street, and that was all great and everything. But this band has been, it's just the best ever. And I met my wife, by the way, through this band. So she bought the first 2 audio cassettes that we put out. She bought 2 of them, and they're right there in that case behind me. So, and I didn't know.
Look, you got your money back after that too.
Yes, I did.
Well, I remember the first time I saw you guys was at a reenactment for the Bucktails up in Cameron County, Pennsylvania.
Oh my goodness, you were there.
I was
That's
there.
right.
first time I met Joe, and we talked, and I was working on a magazine article about you guys, and I mean, just the lightning you guys had around that campfire, and the excitement and the energy, and it was just such a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I've had the
I'm glad you were there for that, because that, you know, people have asked us, you know, what was, well, like you just did, what was our favorite thing? Our favorite place to play was the campfire, always. Dave was talking earlier about people used to come to our camp. One of the early events that we were at, I think it was 1991 in New Jersey. We were playing around, and we have that on video. We were playing around the campfire, and a couple of the guys, my son Eric, I'd rented a video camera from what was anyway one of the video rental places, and so they were taking video, and we were playing around the campfire. We weren't really paying much attention. Friends of ours from the 7th Tennessee were there. There was 20 or 30 of them, and there were our own people, so there were 20 or 30 of those guys. So but when we took a break, when it was all over, we stood up and we looked around. There were 300 people in our camp, down our company street and around the tents behind us. People had come from all over. And at the same time, while that was going on, the 97th was playing the dance, you know, like a quarter mile away from us. And it's like, I just looked around. It's like, holy mackerel, what the hell is, you know, this is amazing. And I don't know, just the whole thing has been.
So Chris, the first time you ever saw us was with the Bucktails?
It was. Yeah. So I wasn't reenacting. I actually lived up in that area.
Well, Chris had reached out to me earlier, and because his daughter was a big fan of Stonewall Jackson.
Right.
And you know, on the Southern Soldier album, the Jackson in the Valley, which I wrote, believe it or not, you know, he said, my daughter's a big fan, and you know, we'd like to come and see you. You're going to be anywhere? And I said, well, you were at Rutgers at that point in time, which wasn't terribly far away. So I said, well, we're playing at this, you know, at Driftwood in Pennsylvania, wherever that is. And if you want to come, you can do that. Well, it turns out it was down one of these deep ravines in the mountains there. And
we almost got lost.
And we almost, you know, we finally got in there, and I was really glad you were able to see, because that was a really good show.
Yeah,
I remember that one. That one was fun.
Yeah, I was trying to track down the provenance of the lyrics, and the liner notes were, you know, it all seemed so authentic, and I just couldn't find anything. And Joe's like, well, yeah, the secret is I actually wrote that stuff.
The Gooch County Regulars. Yeah, there you go.
Well, that was it. You know, the whole thing of that was that we've been playing the melody to Cripple Creek for, my brother and I have been playing it for already 20 years by the time we were doing this. And so I was going someplace. I was like, Boris, cut it out. Can't talk right now. Bye. I'll call you back.
John Boy Driscoll, the alleged author of Jackson in the Valley, was actually one of the guys in our unit. Yeah. We decided to make him the source of the lyrics.
The Gooch County Irregulars or whatever. And yeah, but the song, the refrain just hit me in the head. Jackson's in the Valley, you know, all hell's a breaking loose. Oh man.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was a great song.
So anyway, yeah, and I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, no, fine. So it's about time for us to wrap up anyway. But
okay.
Does one of you want to kind of give us a little synopsis, remind us when and where, if folks want to get tickets for the concert?
Yeah. Well,
November 15th.
Yes, November 15th at the Gettysburg Middle School. You can find out how to do it on the band's Facebook page, my Facebook page, Joe Whitney's Facebook page, theoretically. And
the Regimental Quartermaster.
Regimental Quartermaster, and also the Lomas Center Museum .com, I think.
Okay.
And and I can provide you with a couple of links if you want. It's also going to be live streamed for people who want to, who can't attend, but want to, want to watch the show. You can do that too. So.
Oh, very good. Yeah. So we'll make sure we post some links so folks can find out information. But
Thank you so much, Chris.
yeah. So it's a real pleasure to be able to sit down with the three of you today. Fred, Joe, David, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks you, Chris. Take care.
Likewise. I'm Chris Mackowski for the Emerging Civil War podcast. We'll see you online and on the battlefield.